What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Go 247 podcast. I'm Glenn West, senior writer here at the site. It's game week. We got a game this week to play, Dylan. We're super excited, obviously, to get the season started, and obviously we just got back from watching Coach Kelly, who met with the media for his 30 minutes on Monday. Just a couple of things we want to run down in this podcast for you guys. We'll have another one up later in the week as well, but kind of before we get started, we'd obviously like to remind you guys just to throw a like button on the video. Certainly hit us up on Spotify and on Apple, and make sure you guys are tuning in on wherever you guys get your podcasts. So just wanted to get that out of the way first. But Dylan, how's it going, man? Good to see you.
It's going great. Football's officially back. I stayed up until 2 a.m. to watch Vanderbilt beat Trounce Hawaii 63-10. That's my favorite part about college football, just like the nonsense games that I'm watching on weekends. But we have an LSU game to look forward to, and it's a standalone game. The entire country is going to be tuned in, which is kind of nervous for like a first game. Like you kind of don't want everyone to be watching your first game with a new regime, but LSU is going to be the talking point of the night because that is the only FBS game on Sunday, which is awesome.
Yeah, no, it's going to be a lot of fun, and it certainly sounds like Vanderbilt's on its way up. 63-10 trouncing of Hawaii. All right, well, we'll get right into it. Brian Kelly met with us for about 30 minutes, on Monday, and we went through a lot of stuff. But one of the very first questions was about the quarterbacks, and we won't keep you guys in suspense on that. He has made a decision, and he will not be releasing it to the public. So. That's kind of the big takeaway with the quarterbacks. There's a lot of stuff behind that, which we'll get into. But I think probably the biggest takeaway for me was just, this is a quarterback battle that really seems like it's 1A, 1B. I mean, he reiterated that today with us, talked about how much he loves Jaden Daniels and Garrett Nussmeier as quarterbacks and thinks that both will be able to help them at some point this year. But at the same point, he kind of made it an effort to tell us that it's a tactical advantage. Florida State had a game this last weekend, and LSU did not. And so Florida State had a chance to kind of look at what it needs to do, albeit against a team like Duquesne that you probably should beat and handle like they did. But it was important for them, I'm assuming, to really get some of that gameplay out there, get some of those first game jitters out. And that's really a good first game for them to kind of work on what they need to work on. And, I think for LSU, they kind of see it as an advantage to have not had to play in that first week game. And they get to hold their cards a little closer to the vest here with some of these bigger decisions. And so that's what kind of Kelly told us was like the tactical advantage that it gives them, not really announcing a quarterback until game day. But just what were your overall thoughts about Kelly today and just the press conference and the quarterback battle as a whole?
Well, obviously, personally, selfishly, I just want this to be over. I want to know the quarterback. I want it to be named. But it does make sense to gain as much of an advantage as possible by not naming, because now even if Florida State has a good sense of who LSU is going to play, they cannot focus fully in on one quarterback. And while they both have similar styles of play, each one has a strength that the other one doesn't. So you do have to change up how you prepare for each quarterback. So I think this is probably what should have been expected, but selfishly, I wanted a quarterback just to end this because I hate Louisiana football fans have been coaching searches on every kind of sports, position battles, and every kind of position. I'm tired of it. I want some consistency, but we don't know that yet, and that's fine. We'll get the quarterback early, assuming like right before kickoff, or we might have to wait until just to see who takes the field first.
Yeah.
And as we've spoken, whoever takes the field first against Florida State might not be the starter completely. I don't know. It's interesting. I get it. I get why they would do it. But yeah, we just have to wait a little bit longer.
Yeah, I mean, I think another thing that he mentioned today was he woke up, really 2 days ago, and he knew who it was. I mean, this was how tight this battle has been all fall. that he didn't really have a strong sense of who it was going to be until literally 48 hours ago. And so, the team knows they're going to start preparing like they have their quarterback for this week. But the other thing he really kind of mentioned was just the play styles of Nussmeier and Daniels, and how I think probably from a media perspective and from a fan perspective, we spent a lot of the offseason talking about how different this offense could look with either guy behind center. And I get the sense that LSU feels like they can have a pretty similar offensive scheme with these two guys. That they think they both have the mobility, they're both able to scramble and make plays. And they both improved their accuracy. I think Jaden Daniels really showed us throughout this fall how accurate of a quarterback he can be. Nussmeier has certainly improved a lot in that area, and just kind of the understanding of what it takes to be a college quarterback. I think that really clicked for him back in the spring, and you've seen that momentum carry on into the fall. And this is a situation where I expect both of these guys to play, like you mentioned. Like these guys, the starter against Florida State very well could not be the starter against Texas A&M in the last game of the season. And so I do think that there's going to be some, back and forth this year. He made it sound like it's a really still going to be a tight thing where, these guys are going to have to, whoever's not the starter is going to be right on the tail. And so I think that could be looked at as a good thing or a bad thing. I think obviously a guy looking over his shoulder the whole season might not be kind of the trajectory that they want. But that's how close that this thing is. And I think that's, whether it's Daniels or Nussmeier, you're going to see both of these guys have to prove it week in and week out for them to carry on and be the next week's starter.
Yeah, I'm just ready. But moving on to I'm just ready.
Yeah.
Moving on to the press conferences as a whole, I don't know if you've thought this. I know it's a common sentiment, but I've really enjoyed the openness of Brian Kelly going into a lot more deep detail than they've had to, and just having like real answers to go and delve deep into that like meaty subjects to talk about, like instead of just surface level press conference talk.
Yeah, I agree. And one of the things he went into really great detail today was kind of the game week rundown for LSU and kind of what that looks like. And we'll probably have something up on it, in the next couple days or so. But really find it interesting that they kind of give, like, today is an off day for LSU. They're not really doing a whole lot today. They won't start getting into their prep really until tomorrow. Now, obviously, with them playing on Sunday, I think that has a little bit of something to do with it. But the game week, the game plan all week is to make sure these guys are physically ready to play on Saturday. And so their big days during a normal game week will probably be on Wednesday and on Thursday is what it sounds like. Those are going to be kind of the two big practices that they have in terms of preparation. That all gets pushed back today because LSU's playing on Sunday this week. But and then really the big thing that I thought was really interesting was, Coach Kelly likes to work out his team on game days. When there's a game at night, he wants to get the guys out of the hotel room into a workout setting, get some blood flowing a little bit, which I think is a really good idea. Something LSU obviously hadn't done a whole lot of, I don't think, in past years. But getting guys on the field, breaking a sweat, get them back to the hotel room, get some food in them, and then bring them back out to the game. I think that's just a really smart way of getting your team ready, getting guys juices flowing and really prepared for a game. So that was probably one of the bigger, I guess, talking points that he went through today. And what were some of the big things you kind of took away from Brian's press conference today?
Yeah, I think one of the other big things is the availability of Malik Neighbors. We've talked about health being at an all-time high at this point, a lot to the point where Brian Kelly reminded people to knock on wood because there's still a week left. But Malik Neighbors, he wasn't able to practice on Saturday. Obviously, a little bit of an alarm raiser because of how good his fall has been. You want to have him available from week one, and it sounds like that will be the case.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think so. They talked about getting him involved early in drills early this week, and he'll be a full participant in practice by week's end. So they they called it a little ankle sprain. They said it's not much to worry about and that he'll be out there. And I asked him about the receiver room as a whole. He said they could play as many as 7 or 8 guys on Sunday, which is just an astronomical number to think about in terms of receivers. I mean, that depth is going to be really crazy to watch unfold all off season. You got Jack Besh now, who's really looking good in the last couple practices that we've seen, moving well. He's certainly come back from that little injury hampered, then got him out the first couple weeks of fall camp, but he seems to be on the mend. Sounds like LSU has an offensive line. It's a little different than what we were used to the first few weeks, but it had been kind of a consistent lineup the last week or so. You're going to have Cam Wire at right tackle, Miles Frazier at right guard, Garen Dellinger at center. Bradford's going to be at right guard. Garrett Dellinger's at center. Left guard's going to be Miles Frazier, and left tackle is going to be Will Campbell. And they'll mix in Tremont Shorts, I'm sure, on Sunday. They'll mix in probably Charles Turner, another tackle or two. But that's going to be kind of your framework, I think, for the offensive line. That was really interesting, I think, to hear. But yeah, I mean, I think probably the biggest thing is this quarterbacks, man. We're going to find out eventually, and you can't hold us off forever. But it sounds like this is certainly going to be a game day decision, and we'll certainly keep you guys posted as the week moves along.
We do have one more opportunity to talk to Brian Kelly before the game, and that's after practice on Thursday. Maybe he changed his mind. Maybe then he'll give it to us, but probably not. We'll probably have to wait until game day.
Maybe he'll give it to the fans at TJ Ribs on Thursday night, right after he talks with the media. Who knows? But okay, all right. So that was the first part of what we wanted to run down today. Second part, obviously, is the Florida State game. We got an early look at Florida State over the weekend. They took out Duquesne 47-7. Certainly looked like a run game is going to be a force to be reckoned with. But Dylan, you watched this game closely. You wrote about it this morning. Just what are some of your big bullet points, I guess, to know about this Florida State team?
Well, in offense, so Mike Norvell is still the play caller over there, but they did promote Alex Atkins, who has a very interesting past in terms of offense, because he learned from Willie Fritz over there in Tulane. And something that I think if you watch the game, you notice immediately is how much they use H-backs in that offense, as opposed to just your typical tight end lineup. So you'll have 3 or 4 technically running backs on a lot of plays, which is insane. They like to line the running backs up behind the quarterback to try and hide which direction they're going, and they'll have that H-back crossing over a lot. It's going to be a lot of guessing and a lot of options as opposed to where the play could go on every down. So LSU is going to have to play smart. They can't bite into any fakes or anything like that, and just be aware of where those option lanes are going to be. It certainly seems like with Atkins, the promotion of Atkins, they're going to have a running game that sets up their passing game as opposed to the other way around. That running game is going to be fierce. I mean, they ran for 400 yards against Duquesne, but I don't expect, or if LSU has 34 missed tackles like Duquesne did, I think it's going to be, there's going to be a lot bigger worries to worry about this season.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think probably the biggest takeaway I watched most of that game on Saturday as well. Outside of the running backs, which, by the way, 3 of those guys ran for over 100 yards. Wouldn't expect that to happen against this LSU front 7, but you can never officially count anything out. But I think probably the biggest advantage LSU might have is with their front 4. I think one of the big things that we saw on Saturday was this is a Florida State offensive line that's a little banged up right now. I mean, they went through a couple of centers. I think there's some injuries that we're going to be keeping a close eye on throughout the week with that offensive line. But there were times during that game where Duquesne was able to get some pressure, get some pushback on that offensive line. And if a team like that's able to do that, even in short spurts, I do think that lends you to believe LSU's got a good opportunity here with BJ Ojulari, with Ali Gay, with Mason Smith, with Jacqueline Roy, Makai Wingo. I think LSU is going to be able to get some pressure on Florida State this week. I think that's going to be a huge part of their game plan, and it has to be, especially with a quarterback like Jordan Travis, who can be mobile, who can scramble a little bit and extend plays. You want to get as much pressure on this team as possible, and I think that is certainly going to be an avenue for LSU to really try to capitalize on defensively. What do you think about their offensive line? And did you get a really good look at what they were able to do over the last year or two?
Their offensive line, I think, is one of the biggest question marks on their team, not only in terms of the talent level, but also who's going to be available, because they have had a ton of injuries along their offensive line, mainly in that interior. At one point against Duquesne, they were on their fourth string center. If that just should give you an idea of where they're at. So yeah, it's going to be a question that I know PFF graded their offensive line poorly against Duquesne, and you kind of saw it. Duquesne got into the backfield a lot. Of course, it was a terrible job of tackling, as we've missed. They did force 34 missed tackles, or 36, in the mid 30s of missed tackles, which is unacceptable football. But yeah, they got penetration. They got past the offensive line quite a bit, and you just think, with LSU's talent of the front seven, and with Matt House's background, that the defensive line should have a good day. It should not be an issue. And I think if you're able to force Jordan Travis to win the game with his arm, you're putting yourself in a great spot to win the game, because Jordan Travis is not a terrible quarterback, but he's only, looking back at it once, has only ever had one game where the running game wasn't amazing. They still ran for over 100 yards in that game, but it was up to him. He had just under 300 yards passing, 3 touchdowns. That was the only time. It was against Boston College last year that he's ever had to use his arm to win a game. So I think if you're able to force them into that, you're in a good spot.
Yeah, I agree completely. I do kind of want to switch things over to the offense in a second. But I do think it's also going to be a really important week for the secondary. I think just in terms of how many guys they roll out there at cornerback. We've heard really all offseason how they're going to use those transfers. They're going to get everybody involved. Certainly sounds like Jarek Bernard-Converse is going to get a hefty role. Mekhi Garner, Colby Richardson, Seven Banks. I think that we'll have to see with Seven. He's been in and out really for all of fall camp in terms of practice and what he's able to do and not do. So having some depth at corner, I think, is really going to help you out. But the key is going to be the run game. You're going to have to stop that run game. But I guess just shifting over to offense a little bit, I do think LSU again has some favorable matchups here. I think LSU starting with their receiver core, I mean, it's unmatched. I mean, and it's unmatched in many other places around college football. I think they're probably one of the top units in all of college football. Obviously, starting with Keyshawn Butte, and you throw in Malik Neighbors, who's going to be back. You got Brian Thomas, Jack Besh, Chris Hilton, Jeray Jenkins, who Coach Kelly talked about being probably one of the more consistent players on this roster in terms of just the production he's given in fall camp. But I'm really going to be interested in the running backs. We've heard John Emery is potentially not going to play in these first couple games, and I think this is going to be a huge opportunity for Noah Cain and Armani Goodwin. I mean, we've seen Cain a number of times this fall, and he really looks like he's progressing with every practice. He's got that Jones fracture out of the way. He seems to be really back and fully ready to be a huge part of this team moving forward. And I think he's going to give you a lot, in terms of just production. He's obviously got the most experience of this group. But offensively, where do you think, I guess, kind of the advantages lie for LSU, quarterback aside, because we don't really know exactly who's going to be starting, but where are the advantages for LSU?
So the strength of this Florida State, maybe team as a whole, is their defensive line. They brought in Jared Verse, who is a transfer from Albany.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously it's going to be a step up for talent wise in terms of LSU will be the best team he's probably ever gone against. And you'll probably see him against Will Campbell a lot. He is their pass rusher. He is they are missing, I think it was like 12 sacks from Jermaine Johnson last year. They're missing a lot of production, but they brought in and they supplemented that with transfers. And obviously Robert Cooper is a very good defensive tackle. So it's going to be interesting. They're going to be aggressive. So I think LSU has kind of worked into their favor. They've focused a lot of that short and intermediate game during practice. So I think whatever quarterback they do has to do a good job of getting the ball out fast, quickly, and efficiently, and then allowing the receivers to do stuff after the catch, because their biggest mismatch is their corners have not been great. They do have Jamie Robinson, who is a former SEC safety. He played at South Carolina. He is a very good safety. He was their team's leading tackler last year. He should be pretty good still. Again, he's going to be pretty much their leader on that defense. But outside of him in that secondary, it's a lot of question marks. We don't really know how they're going to perform. They didn't look stellar against Duquesne's receivers and quarterback at times. So if there is an opportunity for LSU to take this game over on offense, it'll be using the mismatch. There's nobody on Florida State's team that should be able to cover both Kayshawn Booty and Malik Neighbors in a play. They should not be. They're going to have open receivers. It's just getting the ball to them quickly.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. I think that's probably the best strategy to win. I think, and really outside of Neighbors, I mean, I'm going to be looking heavy at Brian Thomas. I think Brian Thomas has had a really nice underrated camp. Not many people are talking about him, but he's going to be a huge fixture. Coach Kelly made sure to point him out as a guy that they're going to really rely on. He pointed out Kyron Lacey and Jeray Jenkins as well. I mean, we went down the line there a little bit with the receivers, but yeah, it's going to be important, I think, for this offensive line that really has no built-in game continuity yet. I think that's going to be a huge first test for this group. You mentioned Will Campbell. Obviously, people are really high on him and think he's got a very bright future. I'll be very interested to see how he does on the left side. We've heard Anthony Bradford's name for several years now. I think people are ready to see him kind of fulfill those expectations and really take over on the right side. But I do think you could still see some shifting. I mean, Coach Kelly has said it, really religiously over the last week. There's a group of 7 or 8 guys that they feel comfortable throwing out there, and based on who's out there, it's going to toy with the rotation a little bit in terms of the lineup and what it looks like. You could see certainly some situations where Bradford's at right tackle, where Frazier's at right guard. Where you kind of slide Charles Turner in on the inside somewhere, and where does Garrett Dellinger go, or something like that. There's going to be some different mismatches that I think you're going to be able to, take, throughout the game. But I'm going to be very interested to see this offensive line and how they kind of handle that front 7 of Florida State. We'll certainly get into more of that later in the week as we learn kind of who's in, who's out kind of deal of within Florida State's regards. But I think probably the biggest thing, moving forward is into Sunday, stay healthy. You've gotten this far. You've gotten 4 weeks into camp. You've had some really competitive practices. We've been out there for some of them. Tackling's been great. It's going to be very important, I think, for this group to just be healthy. I mean, just stay healthy, because I think there is some concern about depth on this roster, and so you've got to certainly make sure that you're well prepared physically to handle what Florida State's bringing. So, was there anything else, I guess, with Florida State that really stood out, or was that pretty much the big takeaways you had?
Those are the most takeaways. Obviously, they didn't get into their more creative play calling on offense or defense against Duquesne, but I do think that Brian Kelly did mention it as there is film on them now. I think it is definitely an advantage in LSU's part that they do get to go back and watch and see at least the base I mean, it's going to be the same base offense, base defense that you saw against Duquesne, and you are going to be able to gain some things from watching their footage. So it's not all just a wash. It's not just a scrimmage. LSU doesn't get the benefit of playing in game action before Florida State did, but there is a lot of footage, and there are still a lot of unknowns about this LSU team. So I'm just ready to get to football.
Yep. No, I think so too. And look, we're gonna kind of just give you the schedule, I guess, real quick. We'll have player interviews tomorrow night or Tuesday night. We'll get to talk to some players and get kind of their thoughts of how they're feeling before their first game. We'll get a chance to talk with Coach Kelly again on Thursday. But then we're pretty much gearing up and writing preview stories, prediction pieces, players to watch. All features. We'll keep you guys certainly up to date on anything that breaks, and I think it's going to be a really fun season. And I'm really excited to get started here with a new group, with a new crew, with obviously with Dylan, who's going to be there on Sunday as well with me. We're going to be up there taking in all the sights of the Superdome, and it'll be my first time, well, actually my second time back in the Superdome since that 2019 national championship.
I was going to say, I need to remember to bring some binoculars because the Superdome puts the media way up there.
Yeah. I remember being in the championship game, and they had so many press requests that they stuck me at the very top of the actual seats. They built tables, I remember.
Oh, wow.
And at the very top of the nosebleed section. So that's where I was sitting. Had my jacket stolen at the very end. I went down for press after the game, came back, and someone had left with my jacket, which is essentially, a blanket for other people, I would imagine. So hopefully somebody got some good use out of it, some good fabric out of it. But we'll be very excited. We'll keep everybody, posted on everything. But
I think we'll be back later this week with another podcast.
Yeah, we'll be back on Thursday or Friday with another one. The wonky schedule this week, I think, has kind of thrown us off a little bit, but we'll certainly be back soon. Make sure again to hit the little like button on the YouTube video and tune in wherever you guys can. But we really appreciate all the support. So with that, I'm Glenn West. He's Dylan Sanders, and we'll see you guys next time.